So with bodhicitta in our heart and mind, we can do the verse of refuge in bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merits of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merits of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merits of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Good to see everybody. So we'll return to Perbachos Text. And so just a reminder what we're up to now, right? So in general, we're on object possessors, right? And then which are awarenesses or subjects, right? Knowers, you could say here. And object possessors or subjects. I guess subjects is the best word to put it, because a person or a sound can also be a subject. And we're particularly focusing on consciousnesses, right? And so they're remember just orienting us that they're direct perceivers, right, which know non-conceptually, and then which is what we're in the section on now. And then there are conceptual knowers, and we're going to talk about conceptual knowers in a few minutes. But right now we're sort of finishing up the section, just an overview of what are the categories or types of direct perceivers, right? And a direct perceiver is a non-conceptual knower, you could say, although that's not the definition of a knower that is free from conceptuality and non-mistaken. That's the definition of a direct perceiver. We covered that, right? So non-conceptual, free from conceptuality. And so one example, right, of a direct perceiver is an eye consciousness perceiving blue, right? That'd be a direct perceiver. It's not conceptual, right? And the eye consciousness itself that's perceiving. And remember, last time I'm just reviewing to make people bring people back to where we were, and also that all these direct perceivers, Perbachos notes, has like they're all caused, right? So that they have an external object, like they see something external. So well, except for the self-knowing direct perceivers, which we covered, but the others have an external object, right? That they're perceiving something external to themselves, right? That's the external. That's one condition. But and then they have an immediately preceding condition. But anyway, and then they also have what's the term for that from last time? Their own unique empowering condition, or an empowering condition. And so it is just civil, right? But so for eye consciousness, it's right. The uncommon empowering condition would be the eye sense power, right? For auditory consciousness, the uncommon empowering condition would be the ear sense power, and so on. So I'm just reminding everybody, okay? So now we're up to yogic direct perceivers. And remember, I said this at the very end last time, that the uncommon, it says here in the text on page 8, the uncommon empowering condition for a yogic direct perceiver is a meditative concentration that's a union of calm abiding and special insight. So, so according to, so in this tradition, well, in general, ordinary people don't have yogic direct perception. And he says here, the example he gives is a superior, an Arya. So Aryas have these yogic direct perceivers. So that's it. Okay, and where we left off then was this. So that's just reviewing, right? So that the unique empowering condition for a yogic direct perceiver is a union of calm abiding and special insight. And I covered last time what that is. But then we left off a little below there on page 8 still, where it says, one point he makes is he just says, there is no awareness to which an object appears, but is not ascertained, that are yogic direct perceivers. because a yogic direct perceiver necessarily ascertains its object of comprehension. And then he quotes Dharmakirti saying, from just seeing the great intelligent ones ascertain all aspects. And so that makes sense, doesn't it? In other words, if you just, actually, I want to say that too. I mean, just for me personally, in studying this again and sort of reviewing in order to teach it, the value is in thinking deeply about these things. Like, and you can get, for me personally, it's been incredible just to think about these teachings, I mean, about many, and also, particularly about us at ordinary level, but even here, right? Because in other words, you think about it and you say, well, how could there be a yogic direct perceiver that to which an object appears but is not ascertained? It can't be, right? Because the idea of a yogic direct perceiver is that the person has a union of calm abiding and special insight, which means they're completely focused on whatever they're ascertaining, right? Calm abiding, especially when it's in union with special insight, means that it's like penetrating and completely absorbing itself in the realization of whatever it's cognizing. So for a mind like that, of course, nothing could appear but not be ascertained because it's completely penetrating the subject matter. It's thinking about it. It's completely absorbing itself in a kind of insight into that subject matter. So you see what I mean? So this little philosophical point is implying something to think about what what would it be like, right? You can imagine, what would it be like to have a yogic direct perception? The idea is that the mind directly perceives, what it's ascertaining in a very deep and transformative way. So then it says, and then he's talking, next paragraph here, he talks about the mind of a Buddha. So he says, although subsequent cognizers that are yogic direct perceivers exist, the second moment and so forth of an omniscient exalted wisdom are not subsequent cognizers, because whatever is an omniscient exalted wisdom is necessarily a valid cognizer. So what's he saying there? Right? I just want to point this out. What he's saying is, for a non-Buddha, right, when they have a yogic direct perception, for example, on the path of seeing, when they have a yogic direct perception of emptiness, of selflessness in this school, that first moment is, remember, in this school, valid cognizer has to be new, right? A new incontrovertible knower, right? So for an ordinary bodhisattva, they're ordinary, and then they see emptiness directly at the beginning of the path of seeing. They're no longer ordinary, they're an Arya. Right? That first moment of seeing selflessness would be a valid cognizer, or pramana, right? Because it's new, it's incontrovertible, and it's a knower. But then the next moment of realizing selflessness directly would not be a pramana. It would be an accurate perception and a direct perception of selflessness, but it would no longer be new, right? They would have seen it the previous moment. So it would be a subsequent cognizer, right? So he's saying here that there are subsequent cognizers that are yogic direct perceivers. He says they do exist, and those exist in the minds of people who are training on the path, right? Who have yogic direct, so they exist in the minds of meditators, basically, right? So somebody on the path of meditation, for example, right, who's absorbed in a meditation on selflessness and directly perceiving selflessness, they're having a yogic direct perception of selflessness, but the second moment, if they meditate in that state for an hour, right, the first moment could be a yogic direct perceiver that's a valid cognizer because it's new, but the rest of that time would be subsequent cognizer. And so one point is subsequent cognizers are still powerful. Does that make sense? They're still, in this case, they're still yogic direct perceivers, but they're not pramana because they're not new. But now what he's saying is, for Buddhas, every perception is pramana, right? And remember I said last time, or the first class, I said this, that Dignaga praises the Buddha as pramana, as always valid, right? But what it's implying here, which is interesting just to contemplate, if you want to sort of contemplate what's a Buddha's mind like, right? Is it saying here, for a Buddha, everything is always new, right? That's what it's saying, really, right? It's always a new cognition. And because that's what keeps it as a valid cognizer, or pramana, rather than being a subsequent cognizer. And then Perbachos justifies it. He quotes Gyaltsab, that's Gyaltsab, right, who is the first throne holder of Tsongkhapa after Tsongkhapa's passing, right? So Tsongkhapa's foremost student, you could say. And in his text, he says, this is Gyaltsab, he says, no matter how much I turn it inside and think about it, I do not feel that an omniscient exalted wisdom is not pervaded by being a new realizer. Right. So he's saying, so Gyaltsab Je is saying, in his view, every moment of a Buddha's awareness is new and therefore pramana. You know. And one question I'll just raise, this is the kinds of topics, we're not trying to become Geshes here, but one thing that the Geshes debate about, and they say in these commentaries, is, think about it for a moment though, right? A Buddha is omniscient. I'm just going to challenge you to think about this for a second. They say a Buddha is omniscient, right? So that means the Buddha knows the three times, past, present, and future. So I'll just ask a question. So how is the second moment of a Buddha's omniscient mind fresh, new? How is it not a subsequent cognizer? How is it not that the Buddha says, oh, I already know everything? So it wouldn't be that. Why is it not a new, what makes the second moment of an omniscient cognizer that knows past, present, and future new? And I'm just challenging you, these are I guess what I'm getting at here is that's the value of studying this question, of this kind of text and reading these paragraphs. It's not just to go, oh, okay, the Gyaltsab Je says that it's always new, right? Gyaltsab Je, I want to go back to the quote. He says, no matter how much I turn it inside and think about it. To me, that phrase in Gyaltsab Je's quote is important because he's implying this is what we should do. In other words, he's saying don't just say, oh, Gyaltsab Je, and he held the throne of Ganden and Tsongkhapa's predecessor. He says it's that, so it's that, right? What he's saying is think about it. He's saying he's thinking about it, right? And he's contemplating it. And he's saying, he's obviously thought very deeply about it. He's saying, I believe it has to be a new cognizer. If it's a Buddha, can't be subsequent. And all I'm saying is like, actually I want to emphasize this because I find great value is like, so Gyaltsab Je's phrase, no matter how much I turn it inside and think about it. I just want to encourage you, if you're going to get value out of this material, that's the thing to do, right? With all the points, not just this point, is to do what Gyaltsab Je did, turn it inside and think about it, right? And even if you come to a different conclusion than Gyaltsab Je for a while, that's okay, right? Like the idea is that you're really thinking about it. So why is a Buddha's omniscient mind, right, always new? And I'll share one reflection, my own reflection on that personally is I remember once it was a point when this was really bothering me. Actually, it's funny, for like a few months it was really bothering, because I was like, well, how does a Buddha, I was like, what does it mean to know the future also? Right? What does it mean to know the three times for a Buddha, right? It says the Buddha is omniscient and knows the past, present, and future. And at one point that finally, actually was in a conversation with Gyurme Khenchen Rinpoche, I finally came to understand it, but that knowing the future doesn't, like, what's the definition of, Gyurme Khenchen Rinpoche said, what's the definition of future? And what Khenchen Rinpoche pointed out is the future is that which will happen because the causes already exist in the present. That's the definition of future. So the future, the present changes each moment, but the future also changes in each moment because the causes that exist change in each moment. And if you think in Buddhist sutras, there's often these quotes where it says, this bodhisattva could not have his or her future enlightenment predicted yet. And then there comes a point where the bodhisattva goes in the presence of a Buddha. You'll read in sutras if you read this, where it says, like, after many eons, this bodhisattva was in the presence of such and such Buddha, and the time had come where their future enlightenment could be predicted. That means it was inevitable at that, right? That it existed as a future phenomenon. The Buddha could predict it because it already existed as a future phenomenon. Before that time, it didn't exist as a future phenomenon yet because not all the causes were in place. So I think that's connected to me from this. This isn't in the text. This is my own reflection here, right? In terms of what Gyaltsab Je is saying is, for a Buddha, each moment really is fresh because the cause, there is in each moment, we say the present's changing. According to Buddhism, the future's changing in each moment because the karmic causes that are in existence are changing. And therefore, sentient beings' futures, maybe changing is the wrong word, but what's the word? They're evolving, they're being produced. Futures are being produced by present causes. And that's part of what the Buddha sees, right? When the Buddha's, this is my own reflection here. So the Buddha's vision is always new then. I just think that's fascinating to contemplate. Maybe you'll have different contemplations or deeper ones than mine, but So anyway, that's Gyaltsab J. And then Kedrub J, right, who was the third, if Tsongkhapa was the first holder of Tsongkhapa's position at Ganden, and Gyaltsab J was the second, Kedrub J was the third. Right? He says, if something became a subsequent cognizer merely through its objects being apprehended by a former valid cognizer, it would follow that the second and subsequent moments of an omniscient exalted wisdom would be subsequent cognizers. There exist many flaws, such as indicated below. Right. So he's saying, so he's raising a different question, which is, so actually, one point he's raising here is that Gelugpa's decided, and that part of the definition of valid cognizer, according to the Sautantrika school, is new, includes new, right? A new incontrovertible. One of the commentators pointed, and this quote, Kedrub J seems to be disagreeing. He seems to be taking issue with the word new. He's saying he doesn't, maybe he's sort of saying maybe it doesn't need to have the word new. Of course, that's the position of Prasangikas, right? But he's saying maybe it shouldn't have the word new in general here. Gelugpa's scholars ended up settling on that includes new in this school. So anyway, it's worth thinking about. These are all interesting to contemplate. Okay, so that's that. So that's just an overview of what is yogic. What is a yogic direct perceiver? Next I'll just keep going and I'll pause after this section for questions. Next, he says, so he was talking there about direct cognizers. Now he says direct valid cognizers, right? So those were all those were direct cognizers, right? They include, for example, subsequent direct cognizers. So they're not all valid, they're not all prominent, right? Now he says direct valid cognizers. This is direct prominence, right? So what is the definition? A new incontrovertible knower that is free from conceptuality, right? So we just said new, right? He's including new because it's this tenet system. Incontrovertible, right? So incontrovertible. So and remember, there are ways of knowing that are not incontrovertible, also, right? Here it's incontrovertible, which means it can't. It's a direct perceiver that cannot that can't be overthrown or can't be refuted. And then he lists 4 kinds of direct valid cognizers. And these are similar to what we already covered, so I'll just cover it very briefly because it's similar to direct cognizers, just these are particularly new and incontrovertible, right? Whereas the others could not be new or could not be incontrovertible. So from among these, the definition of the first, the self-knowing direct valid cognizer, is a new incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality that is directed only inward and is just an apprehender, right? And so remember this. So actually, this is one point that they made in the commentary is all the valid cognizers other than self-knowers know something external to themselves, right? They know an object. They don't know just consciousness. They don't. So it's only self-knowers that are, it says here, are directed only inward and are just an apprehender. So they're not apprehending something, an external thing. They're just apprehending the cognizer itself. And as I've said many times, this is how this tenet system explains memory. Next one, sense direct valid cognizers. So their definition is a new incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality that arises in dependence upon a physical sense power that is its uncommon empowering condition. And again, we talked about these in terms of valid cognizers, direct cognizers, but so the uncommon empowering condition, right, of it's what he says here, there are 5 types, right? So it's the 5 senses. So the eye sense power for form, the ear sense power for sound, the nasal sense power for smell, the tongue sense power for taste, and the tactile sense power for touch. Then mental direct valid cognizers is a new incontrovertible knower free from conceptuality that arises in dependence upon a mental sense power that is its uncommon empowering condition. And so and then he says there are 6 types of when mental direct valid cognizers are divided, there are 6. And so a mental sense, and part of the point here is that a mental direct valid cognizer can know form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or can know, they call it dharmas, right? Things, in other words. So mental objects. And an example of a mental object would be, well, actually, an example of a mental object would be a clairvoyant mind, right? That knows somebody else's thought. That's an example of that. And then the last type of direct valid cognizer is a yogic direct valid cognizer, right? Which is an other knowing, exalted knower in the continuum of a superior, meaning Arya, that in dependence upon a meditative concentration, that is a union of calm abiding and special insight, I think I should say as its uncommon empowering condition, newly and directly realizes either subtle impermanence or the coarse or subtle selflessness of persons. Right, so that's according to this tenet system. So I want to point out, right, what are those three? There are three objects. According to this tenet system, there are three things that a yogic direct valid cognizer, but you want to go back. So first of all, these are in the continua of Aryas, right, superiors. They arise through this union. Their uncommon empowering condition is a union of calm abiding and special insight. Right? They have to be new if it's a valid cognizer, because the definition of valid cognizer in general is new. And then there are three objects that they may know. One is subtle impermanence. I just remind everyone, what's subtle impermanence? It's different than, right? Gross impermanence is, for example, knowing that everyone who's born dies. Gross impermanence, an example of that would be knowing that all things that come together will eventually be separated. Subtle impermanence is a direct realization of instant by instant change, right? So this is in the mind of this meditator, at first one realizes gross impermanence, right? So like if you have a realization of gross impermanence, you really get it that you're going to die, right? Or that whatever you grasp at is not permanent, will be dispersed. But when you realize subtle impermanence, it's a direct, in this case, a direct realization, could be also indirect first. But here, a direct valid cognizer directly realizes, for example, a yogi who's realizing that their own body and mind change instant by instant. Right? So they observe their own body and mind in meditative concentration, and they directly realize that it changes instant by instant. And actually, by the way, of course, that instant by instant change is the substrate for the grosser changes of gross impermanence, right? In other words, the only reason that death comes after birth is because we're changing instant by instant. The only reason everything that comes together will be dispersed is because we're changing instant by instant. So here it's the direct realization of instant by instant change, that nothing lasts for a second moment. And then we've studied this before, but what's coarse selflessness of persons, right? That's the direct realization in this case of the lack of a permanent unitary independent self, right? Of persons, of yourself in this case, if you're realizing that. And then what would be the direct yogic direct valid cognizer of subtle selflessness of persons? It would be realizing your own lack of having a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, right? And according to this tenet system, that's the cause of liberation. When you realize that, that's the main cause for you to become liberated from samsara, according to this tenet system. So those would be the things that can be realized by a yogic direct valid cognizer according to this school. And that's what it says on the second page here. Yeah. And so I just defined what those are. Now I'll pause there because then we're going to go. Then I want to actually go into a kind of preface to the next section for a moment. But any questions about? What I just covered, you can see the difference. It's just one point is it has to be new and incontrovertible to be a pramana, a valid cognizer. So not all direct cognizers are valid cognizers. But also you get it, the valid cognizer here, something that's not a pramana or a valid cognizer, it doesn't mean it's not valid, right? Like, because the first moment of seeing a color blue is a pramana, right? Valid cognizer. The second moment of seeing blue is still valid. It's still a valid mind. It's just not a pramana because it's not new. Does that make sense? So there's some emphasis on newness in this school and some other schools. But I just want to explain that. But anyway, any questions about that section before I go on? Sujata.
I think I have trouble understanding when we think about the Buddha's knowledge of the past and the relationship to the concept of new, how one is having, if one repeatedly thinks of a past event, what is new in the recollection of a now static thing?
That's an interesting question. What's new in that? Yeah, it's interesting point, right? Because for anybody other than a Buddha, of course, it wouldn't be new. It would be memory, right? But that's an interesting question. What for a Buddha would make that new? I'm not sure. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting to think about. I'll have to think about it. I'm not sure, to be honest. You ask good questions. Actually, Sujata, actually, I'll just say, this is not an answer to your question, but just yesterday I was reading a commentary. There's a new book out by a scholar, but anyway, it's about Maitripa. And I thought of you because Maitripa raises the point that you raised. He actually said, he was talking about the mind-only school. He's a Majjhimaka. He was talking about the mind-only school, and he says, if you slightly, he doesn't use these words, but basically he says, if you slightly misunderstand, he was Indian, right? So he says, he was living in India. So he said, if you slightly misunderstand the mind-only school's position, you'll make the mistake of settling on a Vedanta view. So he said, and I was like, oh, that's what Sujata was concerned about. And he says, it's not the mind-only school's position, but if you slightly misunderstand the mind-only school's position, you'll say, and so I thought, oh, that's what Sujata was worried about. Maitripa was worried about the same thing. So she's in good company.
Oh, that's so great. Now I only slightly understand. It's wonderful. Thanks, Lauren.
So hopefully eventually I'll have some similar experience with this question, because I'm not sure what would make the Buddhist thought of the past. I haven't thought about that. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I guess it's about like, how is it pramana if the past is unchanged, like if the past is set? I can think about it from the perspective of, in the present moment, we have new information, or things are changing. I don't know, but if you're thinking about that might have implication about what proceeded from that past moment.
Yeah.
The moment itself in the past, it's hard for me to get my brain around what a Buddha would be experiencing as new about a past event. I'm stuck on that.
Yeah, it's hard for me too. And part of the reason why is like, it's almost easy, if you think of like history, it's easy, right? Because we could say, well, history is always changing because our interpretations of it are changing. But a Buddha doesn't do that, right? A Buddha is non-conceptual. And so a Buddha is not coming up with new interpretations. Like, so an ordinary person, we could say, oh, well, our understanding of history evolves because, our concepts evolve in relation to those events. But a Buddha is knowing the past in a non-conceptual way. So it's not that. So that's not, that was when you asked the question, I was like, oh, wow, that's not the answer. That wouldn't be the answer for a Buddha. That would be the answer for an ordinary person. Sometimes, if we're studying history and it is evolving, we can say that, but that wouldn't be the experience of a Buddha, because a Buddha knows the past non-conceptually and knows it as past. So, yeah, and you're right. I mean, how the past relates to the future does change because of current, but I'm not sure if that would change the Buddha's, I'm not sure how that would relate to a Buddha's perception of it. Like, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll have to think about it. Lynn, yeah.
I don't know if this seems to have some relationship to what Sujata asked. It seems like there's a collapse of time if you think of things non-conceptually. In other words, in the current moment, there is no future because the future is undefined, and the past. So it's sort of a collapse of our conception of time. in other words, if it's non-conceptual, then our thinking about past and future is only a concept of it. But if you experience only the present because things are changing, that means the past is changing too. So it's almost as though time collapses in some sense.
I'll just share a thought I'm having, which is for what it's worth. I'm not sure, but I mean, of course, as we always, the experience of a Buddha is inconceivable, of course. But one thing they say is that a Buddha, it's hard to imagine this, can directly see the past. So when a Buddha says, 7 million lifetimes ago in such and such place, I was, Prince so-and-so, and I gave my head for something, whatever, like some story like that of a past life. What they're saying is that the Buddha sees that, like we would see an apple in our hand or something directly, in other words. And also, so in that sense, the past exists for a Buddha as much as an apple exists in the present. And they also say when the Buddha says in the future, if the Buddha can see the future, and when the Buddha can see, let's say the Buddha makes a prediction of Lin's future enlightenment, right? And so the Buddha says, Lin, in this many years and such universe on such and such planet, you'll become a Buddha under this kind of tree, and your name will be that. They say the Buddha sees that directly. In other words, because all the causes exist in the present for that future event, that the Buddha sees it directly because it already exists in some sense. As it exists, they say, actually that's the Buddhist definition. They say it exists because all the causes exist. It exists as a future. It exists in the present as a future event. And that's almost, it's hard to conceive of, isn't it? And that's the Buddhist definition. They say, and until all the causes are present, it's undetermined. As you said, then it's undetermined. But once all the causes are in place, they say the Buddha can see, you'll, I don't know, the tree will look like this, and your name will be that, and you'll be wearing these kind of robes, and on that planet, your body will be this tall, it's whatever planet it'll be, so it'll be like this. That because all the causes exist, they say it exists. And actually it's interesting, and that's the definition of future, as I was mentioning. So like the definition of future according to Buddhism is that which exists in the present because all the causes exist in the present. And that, yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, see, I think, I don't know, at least for me, it's like my concept of the past is much stronger conceptually than my concept of the future. So I think if a direct realizer realizes it directly new, the past is going to be different for that realizer than it was when we experienced it moving along. In other words, if they realize it non-conceptually, it's not going to be the past we think about conceptually. It's going to be something different. So
or at least their experience will be different. Yeah.
The experience. Okay, whatever. It's not, yeah. And we can understand that with the future because with exceptions, we don't think about clairvoyance or seeing the future. We don't hold on to that as much as this idea that we know the past. Well, I don't know. This seems to say you don't know the past. You're not directly realizing the past either.
Well, actually, because we know the past conceptually, don't we? As ordinary people, we know the past. We do know the past, but we know it conceptually.
Permanently.
Yeah,
it has a permanence.
Whereas somebody who's seeing it, like a Buddha is seeing the past, they know it directly. So it's a different experience that we know it concept. And in both cases, it's an existent. Like, because if we say there was, just a simple example, if we say the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia or something, like that existed, it did happen, but we know that conceptually, whereas they say like a Buddha would know that non-conceptually. That's just a difference in how it's known. But the event exists either way as a past event.
But it's how you define it could vary radically. I mean, it's like all this history that, the victors determine, like the slave revolts in Haiti, which are being reimagined. Okay. So the history is being rewritten. So the past is being rewritten conceptually. And I think that's almost like a Buddha, that the Buddhist directly realizes the past differently than whatever history we're hanging on to. But it's harder with the past than the future. That's why I thought, Sujatha's question, it's harder. It's just harder for us.
I agree. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to get through. Interesting to think about, though. Maybe I'll use that as a transition to get into something that I want to bring up as a preface anyway, that will be, I think, helpful, and that will then get us into facsimiles of direct perceivers. Because I just want to share, like, this whole idea of that it's good to think about these things, to contemplate them, right? As I was saying, you're quoting Gyaltsab there, but there's paper. So facsimiles of direct perceivers. First of all, I think it's an interesting phrase, and I want to share this. So facsimile, right? And I looked at it, so tarnang is the Tibetan word, and actually I was like, because I thought facsimile is like a fax, right? So I was like, okay, wait, what is the Tibetan here? So they're saying it means, actually facsimile is a good term in a way, but it means that which appears like something but isn't it. Right? So that is, I think, what the English word means. So a facsimile of something is something that appears like something else but isn't that other thing. And so these are facsimiles of direct perceivers, right? So we just covered direct perceivers, right, which are non-conceptual knowers that, how do we say it? That are non-mistaken. Right? And so facsimiles of direct perceivers are mistaken, is one point I want to make. But now, this is where I want to just kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent, if that's okay, because I think it might be useful. I just want to say this, first of all, like, I think it's humongously helpful to actually stop here and think, what does it mean for something to be a facsimile of a direct perceiver? So it appears like a direct perceiver, but it's not a direct perceiver. And so it says here, first of all, the definition: the facsimile of a direct perceiver is a knower that is mistaken with regards to its appearing object. Right? So what appears to it, and this we've covered a little bit before, but remember, so its appearing object mean if it's a consciousness, right? I mean, I'm sorry, if it's a conceptual knower, then its appearing object is a mental image. Right? And so it's mistaken with regards to its appearing object because its appearing object, like the mental image of a cup, is not a cup, right? And so it's mistaken in that way. So all conceptual knowers are mistaken with regards to their appearing objects, right? Not all facsimiles of direct perceivers, though, are mistaken with regards to their object of engagement. Remember, we covered that in the first class. So, like, in other words, if I think, oh, the cup is blue, it's mistaken with regards to its appearing object, it says here, because the mental image of a cup, the thought of a cup being blue is not a blue cup. But it's correct with regards to its object of engagement. In other words, if the cup's blue, that thought is correct about its object of engagement, the actual cup, but it's mistaken because I'm mistaking the cup, my mental image of a cup, for a cup. So now I want to get into, just to think together about this. So we're talking here mostly, there are going to be some exceptions, but mostly we're talking about conceptual knowers, right, which are mistaken with regards to their appearing objects. So what does it mean to be a conceptual knower? And what is a mental object? And I want to pause here and ask you, like, have you ever thought about that? Like, how much have you thought about what is a mental object? And Perbachos and this tradition say, well, I'm going to give the formal definition first. Perbachos says, I wrote this down because I wanted to actually contemplate it together. Perbachos says that a conceptual consciousness is one that apprehends a sound generality and a meaning generality as suitable to be mixed and as a coarse consciousness. And I want to ask you, like, I want to ask you to think about it. For what in the world does that mean? That it's a sound generality and a meaning generality are suitable to be mixed. And this is what I was actually. This is why I was bringing this up. Like, actually, I mean, because I'll just say this right away. Yeah, if you don't spend time sort of contemplating these teachings, then they're just words, I guess. And but they're actually, I think they're incredibly useful. And so, first, I want to go back. Okay, so I'm going to define these. First of all, what's a mental image? And this is Geshe Rabton says, a mental image is a mentally projected entity that, while not being the object, appears as though it were the object. Right. So that's facsimile. Right. It's a facsimile that appears to the mind. Right. So I'm going to say it again. A mental image is a mentally projected entity that, while not being the object, appears as though it were the object. And then, and by the way, and Ladi Rinpoche says it's the appearing object to a conceptual knower. Right? That's what and that's part of the definition of what is a mental image. A mental image, yeah, it's the appearing object, using that term we just used, right? The appearing object to a conceptual knower. Now, what's a sound generality and what's a meaning generality? And Geshe Rabton, actually, his translator used different terms actually for those. Instead of sound generality, his translator used nominal image. So I'm going to describe this because I think there's a huge implications to this psychologically for all of us as sentient beings. So a sound generality, or as Geshe Rabton's translator called it, a nominal image, is using the definition we just used. It's a mental image that has arisen from words, terms, and descriptions rather than from direct experience. It's a mental image that has arisen in the mind by way of words, terms, and descriptions, and also includes the label or term itself, also can include the label or term itself. Right, so a sound generality, let's see if this is right. We all have, this is something very conventional, right? So a sound generality is like, if you've never been to, like if you've never been to New York City and somebody describes New York City to you, and then you get a mental image. Oh, that's what it would be like. There are big buildings and there's this kind of traffic or food or Broadway plays or whatever, right? You develop a mental image. And it's a mental image that arose through the power of terms and words. Right? And that same would apply, right? If I'm going to meet your friend, let's say we're going out to dinner, and you say, oh, I'm really excited for you to meet my friend. They're really funny and they're very smart and they do such and such for work or whatever, right? And then I develop a mental image. Okay, I'm going to meet this person. They're funny and they whatever, right? And I get some kind of mental image of that person. That's a sound generality. And we have those all the time, right? You're talking to your friend and they say, my boss is a jerk. He acted like this, right? You never met their boss, but you develop a mental image of their boss, right? And so on, right? It goes on and on. You're talking to some friend, they say, oh, I went on the first date with this person, right? You have a mental image of the person you want to date. I mean, so it's very conventional, but it's a mental image that arose to the power of terms, words, and sounds. Then a meaning generality. Geshe Rabton's translator called that an experiential image. And it's a mental image that arose from that arose in dependence upon previous direct perception, right? So a meaning generality would be your mental image of a person you've met before, or of a place you've been before, or of an object you've seen before, right? And that you develop a certain mental image then of that person or place or thing, right? And so now I want to step back for a second and say, so our mental images, Geshe Rabtin says this, our mental images can be based upon either one of those two or mixing of both of them, of the two combined, right? So your mental image of a thing can be just the sound generality, it can be just a meaning generality, or it can be some mix of the two, right? Like, and that's your mental image. Those are the ways we develop mental images, and those are the types of mental images we have. Now, one problem, there are a couple of problems we have I want to point out. One is what Perbachos here is saying, which is they're facsimiles and they're mistaken. Because we always, ordinary people are mistaking our mental image for the thing itself. And that's the mistaken part here. But now I want to point something out, which is like, let's see this straightly. Most of our suffering and most of our happiness come from this, what we're talking about here. So this is like, we can lose track of that if I don't pause to reflect on it together. If we don't sort of pause. And I want to say, like, I want to actually reflect on this together for a couple minutes, because it's actually scary if you think about it, right? We all have direct perceptions, right? That's, we all see, hear, taste, whatever, something, right? And we all have conceptual ways of knowing, and that's normal. That's the way it's supposed to be as human beings, right? If we're not Buddhas. Buddhas don't have conceptual ways of knowing, but we do. But now I want to reflect on this. So your meaning generality and the sound generality, right? And when they become mixed with the object, what I want to point out is this, is reflect now on your own experience. And I was sort of, to be honest, I've been sort of contemplating this for a couple of days, just sort of going, and I've been kind of, disturbed by it as I think about it, is, oh, wow. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, if you live anywhere, right? What are the sound generalities that get mixed with your meaning generalities? And if you notice how you react, right? Notice, and actually, it's disturbing. This thing of them being mixed is very profound, actually. Because what I want to say is this, is notice your own visceral reactions to things, right? When you think about them. And even if, I was noticing this, like, oh gosh, I mean, there were countless examples, but I guess my point is that when you mix, this word, I was like, what? For a long time, I've thought, why do they say mixed? They're suitable to be mixed. I was like, what does that mean, actually? But what it means is this, is like, actually, okay, I'll give an example. I grew up, and I'm older than some of you, younger than others, but I was thinking about this, I know some people from Iran who I really like. But then I remember growing up during I remember as a kid, there was the hostage crisis during the Carter administration. And I remember, like, and I thought of the Ayatollah Khomeini. And I thought, oh, wow, like, I have this mixed. Like, in other words, like, I have some conceptual, like, I never met him, right? But I think of his face. And then I have some mix of, like, all the terms that were used to describe him in the media. And if I don't, what's the word? Censor myself, there's an immediate reaction of aversion. Like, oh, some feeling like that. Right? And then, like, you think of, I'm just picking examples here, but you can go through I guess what I'm getting at is, think of people you feel aversion to. Think of people you feel attracted to. Think of people, like, you're afraid of. think of, and like, it's all, and then notice how your body reacts, right? Your body starts to react as you think of those people, right? If you think of like, yeah, anyway, you get my point. And all of that is because our sound generalities, our meaning generalities, we're mixing them in a way that we think they're the actual object. That's my point. And we believe it so much that our bodies even react to that what's the word? Mistaken knower, right? So it's a facsimile that we take to be the real thing, and we react to it as if it were the real thing, right? And I'm going to keep going for a moment if it's okay, like, because there are a couple of points here that now I understand. I didn't really understand it very deeply when Khyentse Rinpoche said it, but now I think about it more, I understand it better. Is, in Buddhism, there are one thing we're trying to do is develop valid cognitions, right? Pramana. If you have those, then you're correct, right? Or as a valid cognition is correct. Even if it's conceptual, it's correct, right? And it's incontrovertible. So if you're having a valid cognition, you're safe, right? You're okay. Then Khyentse Rinpoche pointed out, but there are many Buddhist practices that aren't aimed at having valid cognitions. They're just aimed at having healthy cognitions. Cognitions that lead to happiness and well-being. So for example, if I think all beings want to be happy, so I should be nonviolent towards them, that's not a valid cognition. I don't know that for sure. Like I haven't, but it's a healthy way to think. If I contemplate it, maybe I could come to a valid cognition of that, right? But if you just think that, that's not a pramana, right? But it's a wonderful way to think. Or if I think, if I harm others, it's creating bad karma. That's not me having a pramana. I don't yet have a pramana of that, right? A valid cognizer of that. But if I think that, it's conducive to well-being and happiness. Right? And then think about, though, how many words, because now this is what scared me the other day. I thought, oh, wow, every time we talk, we're creating for ourselves and others sound generalities. And most of the sound generalities we're creating are unhealthy, right? And then we walk around with those and we react to those sound generalities as though they're reality. And actually, now I'm going to share something a little silly or embarrassing, maybe. Because last night I was thinking about this. I was preparing for class, and then I went up to take a shower. And in the shower, I thought, oh, why isn't somebody done? This would be these teachings would be a Buddhist therapy. Nobody's done that yet. I'm a psychologist, right? I was like, nobody's actually written about that. This would be Buddhist therapy, actually. And I was like, it would be a talking cure, actually, like Freud, right? Because the problem is we have wrong sound generalities. That are wrong, many of them are, they're all mistaken. Many of them are wrong consciousnesses. And they cause so much suffering, right? And then I thought, oh, that's what the Buddha did in India, actually. In other words, he created a therapy that was this. And we make the mistake, I think I realized, this is my own personal reflection now. I thought, oh, we've been wrong, actually. We've sort of overemphasized bodhicitta and emptiness, which are actually beyond us. And I thought of how in India, the Buddha didn't emphasize those. He hid those for centuries. He gave those, they say, to the Nagas, and the Nagarjuna brought them back. And what he emphasized was this teaching, because he recognized that, we want to get to non-conceptual knowing of reality, which is wonderful. And we want to get to bodhicitta, which is wonderful. But what the Buddha was actually emphasizing is, if you're a barbarian, like most of us, like myself, those things are beyond our grasp. What we have to do is stop having insane sound generalities and believing in them, and our bodies react as if they're true, and we do all kinds of stupid things. And it's because we're mixing our sound generality. And I want to just like, I mean, I gave an example before, but I was like, I want to use an example: money, wealth, right? Bring to mind money, wealth, right? That's a mental image. And then if you actually just sat with it, you could sit with that for a month. What are your sound generalities connected to money and wealth? Right? And part of this is that everyone has sound generalities, right? Actually, for the most part, wealth can only be a sound generality, actually, right? You can't directly perceive, there is no direct perception of wealth. You can have a direct perception of a dollar bill, but you can't have a direct perception of wealth. So all you have is a sound generality. So everything you cognize about wealth is a sound generality, right? And like, and now I get it actually. Like until I study this, I don't get it actually. Because I remember I think I've told this story to some of you before, but like when cancer, like I was like, oh, wealth, and like the way we all, whatever your concepts are about wealth, whatever your sound generalities are, right? Before, I remember like when Yume Kenshiro had been in the US for a few years, and people donate money because he's a wonderful teacher. So he had like, and then he was staying at my house, and he had this like pile of dollar bills, or just like thrown somewhere. And I said, Rinpoche, you should put that in the bank, and it can be safer, and it can earn money and earn interest or something. And like, he looked at me like, he was like, tell Tashi. And then I was like, all right, I'll make an appointment at the bank and we'll open a bank account. He wouldn't refuse. He said, yeah, okay, open a bank account. Good. And he refused to go. He wouldn't come along. I said, but it's your money. You have to come, or you're not on it's not your money anymore. It's not, if your name's not on the bank account, it's not your money. And he said, okay, Tashi, you do it. My point is like, what was his sound generality about wealth? Right. And I like, at first I just thought, oh, that's so strange. I never knew anybody, it was like, I've never yet met anybody who would, the first, they were broke their entire life pretty much. The first time in their life they have money, and they say, oh, I don't need it in my name. But I was like, his sound generality about money and wealth and anybody else's I'd known were so different. And you see my point here is like, so whatever you, and actually what's disturbing about this is like, think about any topic. Right? And by the way, wealth, why is that important, right? Well, oh my goodness, how much of our lives, right? How much of our environmental impact, how much of our, how we interact with each other, right? Is grounded in that. Families are torn apart, right? And so on, all these things that happen. Yeah, they're similar. Yeah, so a sound generality would be one version of a mental conception. Paul's question here. So there are two types of mental concepts. One is a meaning generality, right, which is a mental image arisen from experience, and the other is a sound generality, which is a mental image arisen from words. And so anyway, I just want to suggest that is to really think about this one. Like if you really pause to think about, so this term facsimile now becomes very powerful, like, because if you just read this and go, oh, a facsimile of a direct perceiver, okay, it's a nowhere that is mistaken with regards to its appearing object. Oh, that's the definition. You can just move on. And you cannot realize that like pretty much all your problems come from that. And even I'm going to give one more example. I'm just like thinking, I keep, the last few days, I just keep thinking of different examples of this, but I remember like, okay, I'll ask this. What's your sound generality, right? The sound generality part of your mental image of cancer, right? And that's one, I guess I'm just picking another example, like, because that's like, oh my goodness, right? It's such a, like, there's so many sound generalities that in our, I don't know, different for different places or people, but there's so many that are like, like people say, oh, like, I don't know, say it the right way. You see, like somebody says, oh, this person has cancer, right? Or somebody's a cancer survivor. It's a sound generality that has a lot of, what's the word? Associations, right, with it. And I remember sitting in the room when Rinpoche was told he had cancer, and like, he didn't have, and I realized looking back, he didn't have the same category of sound generality, or he didn't mix it in the same way with reality. So in other words, from looking at his face when he was told that, he understood the meaning of the words very well, but he didn't mix sound generalities in the same way other people do. And he also didn't have the same kinds of sound generalities that other people do. His sound generalities that were important viscerally for him were bodhicitta, or love, and other sound generalities didn't have the power they have. And I'm pointing out, like, do you notice that because they're mixed, though, just think about it's really weird, isn't it? Like, how powerful, notice your body, that's, I guess, what I'm suggesting, is notice how your body reacts to certain sound. I remember that when I went to, I had to get my colonoscopy. I went to the doctor. I remember my body was like, I had, I was waiting for the doctor, and it took a long time, and I was like getting very anxious. And I was like, why am I anxious? Like, I'm just waiting for a doctor to talk, right? But it was a sound generality. It was like, I'm getting tested for cancer, and I'd had a negative test result at the time that was like suggested there could be something wrong. And I was like, it's just a sound generality, but oh my goodness, right? The body reacts. And that shows the mixed. That's what I'm saying here, is like, we've all had moments like that. It could be 1,000 different things, but my point is that it's because we mix our sound generalities with meaning generalities, and we confuse them with, what's the word? They're mistaken, right? What's the mistake? The mistake is that we believe the facsimile is the thing itself, right? And so, and I want to point something else out. Like, so in Buddhism, the solution isn't just have direct perception. The solution is have valid cognizers, right? Because they're correct and they're not going to ever cause you to suffer. Or have healthy, realistic, conceptual, some valid cognizers are conceptual, but if your concepts are, and that's why I was like, often think of this, like, Buddhist teachers, right? Like lamas, for example, like, they say the same things over and over oftentimes, right? Because they're trying to get us that, like, and there was just making this point, like, the concepts that are conducive to well-being, I mean, there are many, but they're straightforward, aren't they? All things are impermanent, right? Whatever, things like that, right? There is no unitary, permanent, independent self, and so on, right? Your own and others' well-being derives from loving kindness, right? You'll never be harmed by those kinds of conceptual concepts. But then how many other concepts do we have? And we're not often aware of them. That's what I'm just pointing out, right? Like, that we don't even realize, we're not aware that they're concepts. We think they're just the nature of reality. So anyway, did somebody have I went off on a little tangent here, but that's all a commentary on this word facsimile, actually, just to think about. It's my own thoughts to some extent on this word facsimile. But did somebody have a comment or a question? I can't look like somebody did. But...
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep. Paul.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out the reason I asked that question because I'm trying to understand the term sound generality. It seems to me that I have mental images arise when terms are used. So I guess I'm getting their sound generalities, but me, I stick a lot of ideas onto right or wrong onto my mental images. Like if you say cancer, I get pictures. I don't really get sounds, but I get pictures, and then I stick all of these little descriptions that make sense to me, or that I've encountered or haven't encountered. So it's the term. I really have a hard time using the term sound generality. It's
Yeah, and so you may have more, I mean, and again, there's also the meaning generality would be an experience, Geshe-Rabtin's translator called it an experiential image. And so both are type, they're just going back. So
right,
he
which
said-
is
so that'd be
necessarily
one of those.
mistaken.
And they're all mistaken. Yeah, they both are mistaken. So sound general, like, so
Right.
you could say a nominal image and an experiential image, or a, sound generality and a meaning generality. They're all mistaken. It's just some are derived more from, let's say, like, if, and I'll give an example, like, just to give an example, like if I think of, like if I say, I'm going to use the one of cancer, like on the one hand, if I think of like my mother's mother died of cancer and was sick with cancer throughout my mother's life. From the time she was a little girl, I never met her because she died before I was born. But so when I think cancer, one image that sometimes comes to mind is the look on my mother's face when she talks about her mother. That would be a meaning generality, right? Because it's in other words, it's a experiential image. It's a mental image of my mother's face, suffering a lot, just even to think about it. It's a look of suffering on my mother's face. That's a meaning generality.
Right.
Then if I were to think, oh, well, my grandmother had this certain gene, a genetic thing that caused her to get breast cancer very young, that would be a sound generality. So if I have a mental image of her associated with that thought, that would be a sound generality.
And yeah, I can't see where they're using the term sound generality when that's clearly a mental image. I have difficulty with the phrase, but it's.
Yeah, it might be better for you than to think of it as Geshe-Rabtin's translation. We call it nominal image, a nominal image. So an image that comes from words.
Sure.
Yeah, that might be an easier translation then.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, it's just two different translators' terms. And then Varahi.
Yeah, I actually have three questions. The mental image, that can, let's say we're thinking about a bell ringing. It doesn't have to be visual, right? It can just be sound.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Or touch.
Or touch or anything. It doesn't have to be. Okay. The second question I have is, and this is going back a little bit to in terms of the beginning of the class. When we talk about direct perceivers, it's knower free from conceptuality and non-mistaken, and then a direct valid cognizer is new. I get the difference there. Incontrovertible knower free of conception, but what's the difference between non-mistaken and incontrovertible? And does incontrovertible imply that you don't have mistaken appearance? So that's my second question.
They're like there's a different. I'll give an example of a difference between an incontrovertible knower versus how's the term? The other term?
The direct perceiver is free from conceptuality and non-mistaken.
I'm going to give an example, but it'll be a conceptual one, but it gets at the
Okay.
point. Is like when you have, say, a correct belief in something, like that in karma, let's say, that's non-mistaken because it's correct, but it's not incontrovertible because you don't know it for certain yet.
Okay.
So there are types of knowers. So they use those terms to differentiate, like that there are knowers that are non-mistaken, but are not incontrovertible yet. So that would be an example of that. Like yeah, or even like a doubt leading in the correct direction can be non-mistaken because it's leading in the correct direction, but it's far from incontrovertible because somebody comes along and tells you something else, and then you believe that other thing. So incontrovertible is like irreversible in a sense. In other words, where you know it in your bones, kind of thing, and nothing's going to convince you otherwise because you really know it for certain. Whereas there are non-mistaken knowers that are not incontrovertible. So that is a term to differentiate those two types of experience.
And non-mistaken doesn't necessarily imply that you have non-mistaken appearances, meaning that you don't see inherent existence.
No, in this school, that wouldn't be relevant.
Okay, I got it. Okay. My last question has something to do with something you said a while back that you had asked Khensa Rinpoche. Buddhas are, live in the non-conceptual world. So I think you had a question one time. So when they talk to people, which is conceptual thinking, how are they doing that? And could you just explain that again? Because that really seemed important at the time, but I don't think I captured the full.
One point, I'll say two different, I'll share two different reflections on that might be useful. One is, one time somebody else actually asked Ken Shrimshi that question once, and he said he said what it says in the Uttara Tantra, the text, Maitreya's text, the Uttara Tantra. I didn't realize at the time, but he was quoting or paraphrasing the Uttara Tantra. Is it says, a Buddha, a Buddha benefits beings the way a wish-fulfilling jewel does. In other words, then what they say is because a wish-fulfilling jewel without conceptuality, if you have a wish-fulfilling jewel and you do some rub it and pray to it or something, whatever you wish for appears, is the idea in Indian descriptions or something. And they say almost the Buddha's like that in the sense that without conceptuality, a Buddha manifests what will benefit others, including words and terms. That's one way of saying it. But then, yeah, and I guess, and that's hard, isn't it, to think of, because when the Buddha teaches, it looks like we would say, well, the Buddha's teaching concepts, right? So how can it be that the Buddha's without concepts? And so part of Ken Shrimshi's answer was like that. And it was that the Buddha, based on the Buddha's past vows and omniscient wisdom, that the Buddha kind of, manifests sounds and words to benefit disciples in accordance with their level and need. That's one way of saying it. But then another way of saying the same thing is, I want to go back and just say, this is just my own reflection now on that point, is remember that I want to go back here and read the definition. Perbachos says it, and he's following tradition. It says, a conceptual consciousness is one that apprehends a sound generality and a meaning generality as suitable to be mixed. So in other words, according to that definition, because we don't usually think of concepts as that, right? So in other words, the definition according to this tradition of what does it mean to be conceptual is that terms and words are that they're mistaken, right? In the sense that they're suitably mixed with, that they are the thing in themselves, even though they're not the thing themselves. And so one way of viewing this is when if somebody says a Buddha knows non-conceptually, that doesn't mean actually, according to this definition, that a Buddha can't use words actually, right? It's just that a Buddha is not confused. When the Buddha uses words, they recognize, this is my own opinion now, not what Ken Shrimshi said, but that in other words, a Buddha uses words as a tool to benefit a being, to help that being come closer to reality. But the Buddha doesn't think that those words are mixed or suitable to be mixed with reality, right? The Buddha knows reality as it is and knows the reality of words as they are. This is my own reflection, right? And uses words, as a medicine or as a skillful means or as a efficacious way to help others, but never confuses, right? So, because think about that, right? Again, just want to say it one more time. We say a Buddha is without conceptuality, but a conceptual consciousness is one that apprehends a sound generality and a meaning generality as suitable to be mixed, right? So if a Buddha is not doing that, then it's not conceptual. But when I asked the question to Ken Shrimshi, I've asked that a couple of times, things like that, and I've heard other people ask it. I realize is that we're asking it without sometimes realizing what's the meaning of conceptual. Like I sometimes think, oh, if the Buddha is teaching a concept, that's conceptual. But now I'm going, oh no, wait a second. It's that the listener believes the concept, like, so if the Buddha says, your body is impermanent, right? I have a mental image of body and mistake it for body, for an actual body. The Buddha doesn't, right? The Buddha doesn't mistake the term body for a body and doesn't create a mental image of body. The Buddha is just pointing out a reality, but in a way that's non-conceptual in the sense that it's not suitably mixed. That's my own reflection, is that, so in other words, one can use terms then without them being conceptual. A Buddha can use terms without them being conceptual if they don't do this, if it's not conceptual in the sense of having a meaning generality and a sound generality and having that mistaken aspect.
Can I add that? Thank you. That really helps enormously. Can I just ask one further question? this would be more from the tantric perspective, but when he's or she is actually talking, is that very subtle mind then kind of becoming less and less subtle, and then the gross mind, or is that not what's going on? In other words, that because a very subtle mind might be just completely non-conceptual, or is he still speaking from that very subtle mind, or she?
What they would say, I think what at least my understanding would be that, let's see this the right way. So the Buddha's, if you think of it this way, like the Buddha's subtlest mind and subtlest body, which means subtlest wind, are inseparable, which actually everybody's are inseparable, but the Buddha knows they're inseparable. And so in that sense, so actually it's weird to think about this, right? So the Buddha's subtlest mind and subtlest wind are inseparable and are all pervasive, right? Because in other words, so if the Buddha is omniscient, then wherever the Buddha's, all phenomena are pervaded by the Buddha's mind, and therefore the Buddha's wind or body, in that sense, subtlest energy, call it energy, subtlest energy, subtlest wind. So in that sense, it's interesting to think about, like, so we say, right, the Dharmakaya manifests the Sambhogakaya, and the Sambhogakaya manifests the Nirmanakaya, and then the Buddha manifests as a Nirmanakaya in order to speak, as you were saying, right, to ordinary people. But that's for, I guess, if you think of it from a Vajrayana perspective, they say that, right, that the Buddha never moves from the Dharmakaya, actually. So in that sense, like, let's just say it right, it's not separate. There's no separation in that way from, like, so there's, like, if the Buddha manifests a Shakyamuni like form, that's, or even as a Lama, right, who's a kind of not a supreme Nirmanakaya then, but a Nirmanakaya emanation, from our perspective we can interact with that person, so it's grosser. But they would say from the Buddha's own perspective, it's not grosser, because it's not separate from those subtlest wind and mind. Is that what you were getting at?
Yes, that is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think from their perspective, it wouldn't be separate, because it's
Okay.
not, in other words, it never separates in that sense.
It would just be our karma to perceive it in a more grosser form, so to speak.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why, like, and it's interesting, right? That's why, like, to a great bodhisattva, there are many stories, like, yeah, I mean, it's that thing, like, there are hundreds of stories like this in the Tibetan tradition, or in other traditions too, actually. I just read one in the Chinese tradition, but anyway, the example that when Lama Tsongkhapa went to see Namkha Gyaltsen, who was a Nyingma yogi, he walked in the room, and they say he saw Vajrapani standing there, and Namkha Gyaltsen saw Manjushri walk in the room, and the other people in the room saw an older Tibetan monk and a younger Tibetan monk, whatever, in the room, so it's like that, I think, that, but from Tsongkhapa's own, like, his consciousness actually saw Vajrapani there, and they say Namkha Gyaltsen saw Manjushri there, but other people were seeing two monks. So that's, so it's in accordance with the person's karma then. Yeah. So now I think, we'll cover this a little more. So now I hope this idea of facsimiles of direct perceivers has a power to us, of, like, recognizing this is a very powerful. I thought, oh wow, there should be, like, a whole therapy of this, like, for everybody, not just for Buddhists, for our entire society. It would be like, then we'd become a better planet, better human race. But anyway, so the definition of a facsimile of a direct perceiver is a knower that is mistaken with regards to its appearing object, right? Facsimile of direct perceiver and mistaken consciousness are synonymous. And remember, I just want to emphasize this again, because people can get confused, is that a mistaken consciousness is not necessarily, can be, but is not necessarily. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I said to Shayla, maybe I'll write a book after, get more time, if I ever cut back on work. But anyway, I don't know on that topic. But so a mistaken consciousness here is not a wrong consciousness necessarily, right? Some mistaken consciousnesses are also wrong, but some are right, and we're going to get into that as we go along. So divisions. Second, when facsimiles of direct perceivers are divided, there are 7 because there are 6 conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers and 1 non-conceptual facsimile of direct perceiver. Okay, we'll just keep going because it's going to describe those. So conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers. And again, I just want to pause there. Just that word, right? A conceptual facsimile of a direct perceiver. If you think deeply about that, that's unbelievably amazing, right? In other words, what it's saying is that we have a concept, right? Conceptual. So we have a mental image, a concept, but it's a facsimile. It appears like it's a direct perceiver, but it's not, right? And I want to point out, like, actually, I was even just going out, like, you know, I was thinking about this in terms of, it was like actually helping me. It was actually helping me as I thought about this to be a psychologist. I was thinking of when people have a trauma reaction, right? Like I could think of like when somebody has a trauma reaction. I mean, you know, if you've ever been with somebody when they're having a trauma reaction, right? They have a mental image appears for them, right, of some horrible, terrifying event, and their physiology completely reacts as if it's present. Right? Or not completely, but very viscerally and overwhelmingly reacts as if it's present. Oftentimes that happens, right? So it's a conceptual knower that appears like it's a direct perceiver. The amazing point that and like trauma research has shown that's true. That's part of what trauma research has done. And part of what Buddhism is pointing out is, which we don't ordinarily recognize in psychology, is that that's just an extreme example of what we're all doing all the time. Like, in other words, that you know, we say, oh, wow, this person's having a flashback and they're reacting as if something that's not present is present. And what Buddhism is saying is, well, that's just a more extreme example or a more obvious example of what we're all doing all the time, actually, is we're confusing our concepts and we're reacting viscerally as if they're present when they're just concepts. You know, so if you're laying in bed upset about somebody, you're doing that also, right? If you're whatever, you know, if people are dating, or if somebody went on a date and then you're longing for the person, you're doing that, right? Whereas they're not there, you're confusing your concept for the direct perception, and you're reacting viscerally as if that were true. It's facsimiles, right? If you think of your favorite food and you want it, you're doing that, right? So I was like, oh, wow, I was just having this recognition. Oh, wow, what trauma is just like, we all know, oh, trauma is like you're reacting to something, a mental image, but it's not, as if it were a direct perception. What Buddhism is saying is, yes, that's true, but we're all doing that all the time. And it's just a more obvious example. So actually what we all need is like therapy to stop doing that in the way, you know, to stop doing that in unhealthy ways. And what Buddhism is saying is do it in healthy ways. You know, and Farahi asked about Tantra, actually, like, you know, I remember one time also Ken Rinpoche said that. He said, you know, tantric, when you're doing tantric visualization, is that a valid cognition of the deity? No, it's an imagination. You know, but it's a conceptual knower that's a very skillful one to help you progress on the path, right? And what he was getting at is that we're all always having conceptual knowers. You know, these concepts, you know, which are mixtures of sound generalities and meaning generalities. But many of the ones we have are conducive to suffering. You know, if you visualize Tara, you know, arising out of emptiness and then say our mantra, it's still a conceptual knower. It's still mistaken. Tara is not, you know, you're not having a valid cognition of Tara, but it's one that's conducive to well-being, right? You know, so anyway. This is incredibly powerful. I'm just pointing out the incredible power of this, right? What I think is here. So conceptual facsimiles, direct perceivers. So then he says there are 6 conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers, and he lists them, and I'm going to go through them one by one, just briefly for each one. So the first is a mistaken conception, such as the thought apprehending sound as permanent. And again, I just want to put, right, so in other words, sound is impermanent, right? So it's this is a mistaken conception that's a wrong consciousness. So it's mistaken with regards to this one is mistaken with regards to its appearing object, but also with regards to its object of engagement, right? In other words, because the object of engagement is sound, which is impermanent, but it's conceiving of it as permanent. So that's a wrong consciousness, this mistaken conception. It's not, I mean, so it's a mistaken both with regards to its appearing object, but also with regards to its object of engagement. It's mistaken with regards to both, and therefore it's a wrong consciousness. I just want to pause there. How many of your concepts, of my concepts, of our concepts, are like that, right? Are wrong consciousnesses, just totally wrong. And actually, if first of all, if we're honest, I have to answer, I don't know, which is disturbing in and of itself, isn't it? There is how many of our, right? So, and I want to point out, like Buddhists, Buddhist lamas often use this, right? Sound, they use these very straightforward examples, apprehending sound as permanent, because sound is impermanent, right? But our job as Buddhist practitioners is to go, oh, okay, they're explaining that. Now, what are some of mine, right? What are some of the ones I do every day, where I'm having a wrong consciousness that's perceiving, that's wrong in every way, and those are the right, and actually, by the way, if you think I don't have any, right, then you're wrong. That's a wrong consciousness. That's one point, unless you're a Buddha, right? And actually, even according to this tenet system, which is not Madhyamaka, it's simpler, right? Which is good. We need simpler, is what I'm arguing for here, because we're insane. So we need a simpler technique to start with, and then we can build up to Madhyamaka. But the idea that we have a self-sufficient substantial existent self is another example of a wrong consciousness, right? We all have that. And then every time you get angry, you're having a wrong consciousness. Every time you get jealous, you're having some kind of wrong. There's an underlying that is some kind of wrong consciousness. Every time you have craving, you're having some kind of wrong consciousness. Every time you're annoyed, you're having some kind of wrong consciousness underlying it. So we have these wrong consciousnesses that are mistaken conceptions every day, over and over and over is one point. I just want to remind you. So, it could seem like, oh, well, somebody thought sound was permanent. Oh, that's interesting. But that's just the Lama that's just Perbachos giving like an obvious example. But then we're supposed to step back and go, oh my goodness, I have these all day. Like, I'm going around all day having these wrong consciousness. That's terrifying. Because then I'm making a mess for myself and other people, right? That's how we make a mess for ourselves and other people. And if we didn't have that, then we'd be like, about money, we'd be like Kinshasa, or about illness, we'd be like Rinpoche in the examples. We'd be like different than we are. We wouldn't react the way we do because we wouldn't have these wrong consciousnesses, right? Like that think things are one way when they're not that way, even, on any level, they're wrong. Does that make sense? In every way, our consciences are mistaken. So many of them are like that. And this is kind of funny. And then every now and then we get things right. Not every now and then, we often get things right? You perceive that fire is hot. I mean, those happen often too. I'm exaggerating a little, right? Or you perceive that, that I can feel my hand when I touch my arm. So I'm exaggerating. It's not like we often have correct concepts also. But now it says the second is a conventional conception that is an inferential cognizer that realizes sound to be impermanent, is the example, right? And so this one is, he's getting at valid cognizers here that are inferential. And he's saying, so what he's saying here is kind of funny if you think about it, is we often have totally wrong consciousnesses. Then sometimes we have correct conceptions. We recognize sound is impermanent. And that's still mistaken, right? Because it's not, in other words, because it's conceptual. So it mistakes the concept for the thing itself. So it's still mistaken, but it's not wrong. Does that make sense? It's correct with regards, one way of saying this is it's mistaken with regards to its appearing object, because it mistakes the appearing object for the thing itself, but at least it's correct with regards to its object of engagement. And that's good, right? So the thought, sound is impermanent, is correct with regards to its object of engagement. Sound is impermanent. It's mistaken because it mistakes the thought about sound for sound. And we often have these, right? Like if I think, just the thought, if I think Mike has a beard, right? That would be a correct concept, right? That would be terms, right? So I'm thinking if I have that thought, that's a correct concept. But again, when I close my eyes and think of Mike's face, I mistake that for Mike. It's still mistaken, but it's a conventional conception. It's a correct about its object of engagement. Then the third, this is a little confusing, so I'll explain it. It says inferential conceptions, and it says the third, an inferential conception, is a thought that it gives the example, a thought that the mind is it is a thought that is a mind apprehending a sign. Anyway, what it's saying really is this: I find the terminology just a little confusing, but what they're saying actually is it's not really an inferential cognition, actually, of conception. It's the moment before. What they're actually getting at here is there's a certain moment of experience where it's the moment just before you have an inferential cognition, a correct inferential cognition of something, where you apprehending a sign, where it means where you recognize the reason, or you realize the reasoning. And actually, technically, in Buddhist pramana teachings, what they say is you realize the three modes. You realize the reason, the pervasion, and the counter-pervasion. And so in the next moment, you're going to have an inferential cognition of something. And so an example, I'll just give an example. A typical example in Buddhism would be if you recognize sound is impermanent. Why? And you haven't realized it yet, right? But you recognize all products are impermanent. Sound is a product. Right? So there's anything that's produced by causes and conditions is impermanent. That means product, right? Sound is produced by causes and conditions. And then the next moment you're going to realize, oh, so therefore sound is impermanent. So it's that moment where you've realized the reason and therefore are going to have an inferential cognition. And they're emphasizing that because that's a really important kind of moment, right? Because we're trying to have inferential cognitions that are correct with regards to their objects of engagement. So this third category are where you've realized the reason for something and therefore are going to have an inferential cognition. Then the fourth is a thought that arises after an inferential cognizer. So this will be a subsequent, after you've had an inferential cognition, this will be a subsequent cognizer, that can know something, right? So you've already realized that sound is impermanent, and now you know that, right? And you're thinking about it. That'll be the fourth. So it's an conception that arose from a previous inference. And part of what I just want to point out here is that what they're getting at is that there are a limited number of these conceptual facsimiles, right? Many of ours in daily life are the wrong consciousnesses. Then we also have many right consciousness. Like if you see smoke coming out of your kitchen, right? And you smell smoke as you're going towards the kitchen, you can have an inferential cognizer, uh-oh, something burned, right? That's a correct inferential cognizer. And then you may run in the kitchen and try to see what burnt. And that second moment you're having, after you've already recognized, you have the thirst. So there's a moment where you see the smoke, right? Then you think there's a very fast process, right? But you have some kind of recognition. Wow, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? That would be the third, right? Then you realize, oh my goodness, something's burning. That would be a conventional conception. Then as you're running towards the kitchen, you're having a conception arisen from inference. In other words, you have a conception, I better get to the kitchen to figure out what's burning. Well, that's based on your previous inference that something's burning. So that'd be a conception arisen from inference. Anyway, so those are some of the ways we have conceptual minds, which are facsimiles of direct perceivers. The fifth is memory, and we've already talked about memory. So, and they give the example: a thought that today remembers the object of the past, right? And now, so and that's not a mistaken conception, right? It's not wrong consciousness, but that's also not an inference, right? If I just think, if you think, oh, what did I eat for lunch yesterday? Right? That's not an inferential cognizer. It's not a wrong consciousness. It's just a memory, right? Oh, I had whatever. That'd be another example. And again, why it's not wrong if you remember correct. If you actually remember, if you forgot what you had for lunch and you mistake it, then that would become a wrong consciousness. But if you remember correctly whatever you had, then that would be a memory, right? And it would be a knower that is mistaken with regards to its appearing object. Because, if your whatever you had appears to your mind, it's a mental object that's not the actual thing that you had. And then the sixth is a wishing conception, a thought that today wishes for the object of the future. And I mentioned this one before, right? That's where you, again, just think about how much of that though, right? Where we have the, again, I just always think this is funny. These Buddhist texts, they kind of put it very simply. Oh, wow, okay, so a sixth is a wishing conception, the thought that today wishes for the object, an object of the future, right? But if you contemplate that one, I just want to point this out, right? If you sit and contemplate that one, I don't know how I say it right, like, oh my goodness, right? Like, there is people who spend their whole lives in wishing conception sometimes, not their whole lives literally, right? Because you feel the sun on your face, or you think, of what you had for lunch yesterday, but how much of our lives are spent on wishing conceptions, right? And as some of you have already implied, right, our mental image of what we wish for in the future is just a mental image, right? But like, and actually think about it, like, actually, have you ever, if you actually pause and think about it, like, oh gosh, people have noted that I'm not unique in noting this, right? But like, how many times when you're a little kid, you want to have what teenagers have, and then when you're a teenager, you want to be free like an adult, and then when you're an adult, you want a better job, and then when you have the job, you wish you didn't have, you want to be free from the job, and then you look forward to retirement, but then you're retired and whatever, maybe you don't like retirement, or maybe you're starting to get physical problems. And anyway, my point is like, we can spend our whole lives in wishing conceptions, or not our whole lives literally, but a lot of our lives. And part of what this is getting at is all wishing conceptions, first of all, they're all mistaken with regards to their appearing object. And one other point is like, how many of them are also wrong consciousnesses? Because actually it's funny, isn't it? Like usually in the examples I just gave, oftentimes they're, I don't, you all can ask yourselves this, but like, how many times, if you think back over your life, think of all your own wishing conceptions. Like, so think of other times in your life, like early times. How many times were you right? Like your mental image of what of what life would be like when you had X. How many of them were correct and how many of them were incorrect? For me personally, I mean, like a lot of them were wrong, actually. Like, so anyway, so then I was spending time in a conceptual knower, right, according to this, which was a facsimile, right, and was actually a wrong consciousness, because I was thinking, oh wow, when I become this, then it'll be like that, and that'll be so great, and then of course you get there and it wasn't what you thought it would be. So, and again, like, anyway, what's Buddhism what's the Buddhist teachings pointing out? That's not a really useful way to spend your vacation. Anyway, Sujata.
I was wondering whether or not this last one always has to also have the first one. Whether a wishing conception always involves a mistaken conception.
I don't think it does, because like, so take the example of like, because there are simple levels of it. Like I'll give you, like if you were to say if somebody were, let's say if somebody were, say, a junior in high school and they thought, oh, I want to graduate, I want to reach graduation, like that's a wishing conception, right? Because it's a concept of graduation, but that's not an act. Or is like, now if they add on, oh, it'll be like this and it'll be like that, then that might become a wrong consciousness. But if they just simply think, oh, I want to graduate, in other words, graduation is something that can happen. So in other words, it could be a wrong consciousness, but it could also not be. Like, it's like, or if you, when you were in school, if you thought, oh, I want to graduate law school or something, and then you graduate law school, like, so that was just the wish to graduate, for example. I'm just giving that as an example. Would not be a wrong consciousness, because it's, if you think about it, that's a It's not wrong. That wouldn't in and of itself be wrong with regards to its, it would be mistaken because your mental image of graduation is not graduation. But it's not a wrong, but it wouldn't be a mistaken conception because graduation does exist. There's not a wrong consciousness in that sense. You know, because some of the things we wish for do exist. Like, so, or even on a simpler level, if I think, oh, I want to have lunch, you know, around X, you know, around 2 o'clock, I'd like to have lunch or something. You know, in other words, that's not, that in and of itself is not a wrong consciousness. Now, if I were to think something more elaborate than that, and then it wouldn't happen, that could be wrong. So they're not all wrong consciousness, I wouldn't say, no. Does that make sense though? Or?
I think I'm conflating something like, as an unenlightened person, my conceptualization of lunch is always inaccurate.
That's the mistaken aspect though. Yeah, that's where it's mistaken, but it's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're getting at there, is that all of these, they're always mistaken, but they're not always wrong consciousnesses.
Great. Thank you. That was really helpful.
One other quick one I'll just make just a reaction to that is like, if we can see how they can be, I think it's so useful that we can see, oh, wow, if you read this teaching and think about it, you can see how, oh, okay, I get it now. That a consciousness, as your doctor just did it, right? A consciousness can be mistaken, but not wrong, right? So if I think I want to have lunch and then, you know, it's mistaken in the sense that my thought about lunch is not lunch, but it's not wrong because I can't have lunch probably, unless I die before then. But my point is that if we can see that on this level, it gives us the, otherwise, if you can't see that on this level, then when you get to the Madhyamaka teachings, they're going to be totally confusing. Because there are lots of things like that in Madhyamaka that are more subtle than this. So we have to first understand this. Again, it's like I said this in the tenets classes sometimes. These tenet systems are like steps. So if we can understand this level of being mistaken but not wrong, that really helps to understand the Madhyamaka view of mistaken consciousnesses. I think, but also lamas have said that. I'm not unique in saying that. Anyway, so yeah, I just want to say that again though, like, so just those, I call them conceptual facsimiles of direct perceivers. I personally think one could, it would be useful actually, probably just like months contemplating your own, my own, our own what's the word? Experience of those things, right? Again, just wishing consciousnesses, just wrong consciousnesses, just you know, asking yourself, well, what do I have an inferential cognizer of, and what is just not an inferential cognizer? You know, and like, how do I know if I have a wrong consciousness or not? Right. And part of what this is getting at is there are inferential cognizers. There are correct, right? There are some that are incontrovertible conceptual knowers. They're really correct concepts. Some of them are that, you know, but which of mine are, right? You know, and most of our, you know, most in daily life, most of our correct inferential cognizers are about very simple things, you know, like, you know, I left the milk in the fridge, so the milk's in the fridge. You know, that's an inferential cognizer, right? Like, you know, in other words, like, in my case, you know, Shayla hasn't been in there yet. So, you know, there's what if nobody else has been in the kitchen and whatever, you know, whatever I put in the fridge, and that's an example of an inferential. You know, so there are many very what's the word, mundane inferential cognizers that we have, is my point. And they're all mistaken, but they're not all wrong. And then again, all these others wrong, then they're wrong consciousnesses, they're. And how do we get to that one? I just the last point I'll make on this topic is, and how do we get to that mind that apprehends a sign? Right? How do we get to the point where we actually realize the sign and then can have an inferential cognition? That's important in daily life. It's also important if we want to grow, right? If we want to challenge wrong concepts, you have to do that, right? You have to recognize a sign and realize something, a reason, which then refutes your own wrong consciousness. These are all like really practical, is all I'm trying to point out, for like actually living a good life. These are maybe some of the most practical teachings in Buddhism. Any other questions about all that? I just want to suggest like an idea, which is to actually just pick something from there, pick a couple of those points and contemplate it in reference to your own life. Otherwise, what's the point of studying this? Actually, like it's good. I mean, it's good to understand it. It helps a little bit to understand Buddhism, but to actually relate to those things, like, okay, what are my concepts about? Again, pick your own, whether it's, particularly about things that affect how you live, right? Like, and again, like, what's your, it's actually a little strange, right? Conceptual, so our sound nominal images or sound generalities and meaning generalities. I just want to point out family, right? Wealth, sex, money, country, my town, my neighbors, my job, whatever, like, my parents, my children, these are all, we have sound generalities, we have meaning generalities. And all I'm pointing out is to recognize, even just to recognize that's what we have, right? Like, because like so often we don't even recognize that we're having a concept because we mistake it, right? It's a facsimile, so we mistake it. So you say a word and you have a visceral reaction. Actually, remember Jung, where he had the word association test, where he would like read people words and they would have associations to them. He was getting, he wasn't using these terms, but there was some understanding that, what's the word? That even terms, we have these like powerful associations to. And that's because we confuse them. Anyway, they have this power. Our mental images have incredible power in our lives. So anyway, I just want to suggest that, to contemplate these points in reference to your own lived experience. And particularly when you can notice your body, I just think it's fascinating when you notice your body react to a term or a mental image. Like, so if you bring to mind an image or a language or words, and then you have a physical reaction, then you can really know in your own experience, wow, look at that, I'm mixing. That term, that was where like, for years, I was like, why do they say mixed? Suitable to be mixed. It sounded weird to me initially. But excuse me. But when you notice your body react to a mental image, then it's like that word mixed becomes really powerful. It's like, oh, they're actually quite wise in calling it suitably mixed. That we're mixing, our bodily reaction shows that we're mixing our concept as if it's not a concept, as if it's mixed with the object itself. Lynn had her hand up.
I feel like in class, I understand the concepts for the particular sections, but then I lose a sense of how they all fit together. So looking over this section, it talks about valid cognizers, and there's been direct perceivers, direct valid cognizers, facsimiles of a direct perceiver. And I'm totally lost as to how they all fit together. I mean, when you describe it in class, I can understand the concept within that section, but I don't understand how it all fits together. Or I lose the sense of how it fits together. Maybe that's a better way.
For now, I guess maybe I'll summarize one point just in case it's helpful, which is, to put it simply, like let's really simplify it for a second from a practical perspective. Is, I think one very simple way of thinking about it that's most probably useful for me anyway is this, is that one way that we know things is direct perception. And that's clear, right? Like in other words, you see, you hear, you smell, you taste, you touch, and for me personally, like yogic direct perceiver is a long way off. And I don't know, I mean, we all, according to this tenet system, we all have self-knowers, but that's not really relevant for our purposes on a practical level. It's a philosophical point about memory that others disagree with. Who cares? Like, for now, let's stay with that, right? So there is most of your and my direct perception is sensory. All the other kinds of direct perceivers are good to know about in theory, but they're not our main experience, right? But every single day, I have lots of direct perception of all those different senses, right? You hear sounds, you taste, you touch, and so on. So one thing to say is, okay, so I have direct perceivers, and whether they're new and therefore valid cognitions or they're subsequent cognitions, from a practical perspective, in terms of direct perceivers, again, I would say that's not as important as knowing, yes, I have direct perception, right? And, and if I feel the wind blow, I feel that, right? That's the direct perception. And then the other part so that's one, I think that's one point that's useful to think about. And then the second I would jump to is, then there are these facsimiles of direct perception. And that I mistake those for the actual direct perception. That's what's important, I think, here, right? In other words, and that I have all kinds of conceptual knowers, mental images derived from experience and mental images derived from words, but that I all the time, every day, all the time, actually, I'm mistaking every day, many, many times. That's more accurately say it. I'm mistaking my mental images as if they were direct perceivers, but they're not. And I think that's what's important here. So in other words, because the difference between a direct perceiver and a direct valid cognizer is mainly the newness, and so the main difference is that it's new and versus a subsequent cognizer. And I would say that's good to know theoretically, but it's not, on a practical level, that's not as important. What's important is that there is direct perception, and then there is conceptual knowers, and that those conceptual knowers appear like but are not direct perceptions. And then to ask myself, so first of all, how am I mistaking my thoughts or concepts for reality? And then also, are my thoughts accurate or not? Or are they mistaken consciousnesses that are actually totally wrong? Or are they at least correct with regards to their object of engagement? And so in other words, and to ask that and to recognize, and do I know, and how much am I investing in a concept? I would ask that. How much am I investing in a conceptual knower? And again, it's good to invest in conceptual knowers if they're healthy. Like, if I invest my energy in a concept, if I have a concept, love, love for all beings brings happiness to myself and others. That's a wonderful conceptual knower. And I can actually, I'll just share that, because to me, that's the relevance of these teachings, though. In other words, or am I caught up somehow in a conceptual knower? And this happens all the time. I mean, like for all of us, I think, for ordinary people, where I get caught up in a conceptual knower and I'm mistaking it for a direct perceiver or for an actual thing. And then I can waste days, right? Where I'm kind of stuck in some concept that's actually a mistaken conception, right? That's wrong, actually. Or at the minimum, that's not helpful. Like, even if it's partly correct and partly wrong or something, that's totally not conducive to anybody's well-being. That's the important part here. So I think if that's what you take away, that's enough. That there are direct perceptions and that there are these facsimiles, which are conceptual. There are also, we'll get to next time, there's a nonsense, who cares? Anyway, what really matters here is there are these conceptual facsimiles that appear like direct perception, but are not. And are they accurate or not? How do I know? That kind of question. That's important.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And the rest, if you don't remember it down the road so well, it's not as important, I think. Oh, we went over, so we should, okay. Well, anyway, I think we have class next week, so we'll pick up there and get into inferential cognizers and so on, but we should do the dedication. So the supreme jewel of bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise and grow. Where it has arisen, may it not decrease, but increase more and more. In the snowy mountain paradise, you, the source of good and happiness, all-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. I dedicate all these merits, which are merely labeled, totally empty from their own side, so that the I, which is merely labeled, totally empty from its own side, may achieve Buddha's enlightenment, which is merely labeled, totally empty from its own side, and lead all sentient beings, who are merely labeled, totally empty from their own side, to the state of enlightenment as quickly as possible. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
You explained so clearly.
Oh, good, good.